Hello, everybody. I wanted to give you some information on some of the chemicals that are found commonly in our environment and also in our homes, and tell you about their impact on our hormonal health, as well as giving you some tips on how you can detoxify your hormones. This will be relevant for anybody who has a hormone-driven condition. In particular, looking at conditions like polycystic ovarian syndrome, fibroids, endometriosis, as well as other conditions that have some sort of links to excess levels of estrogen, and of course, conditions that are aggravated or driven by chemical exposure. Know that there are always things that you can do to improve your hormonal health, no matter what your age might be, where you're living in the world. There are always ways that you can tweak your diet, include the use of medicinal herbs, and increase your detoxification ability so that your body is better able to deal with the toxins that are present in our external world, in our nature, in our homes, in our schools and offices. I hope this information is useful for you. Enjoy, and please do follow and subscribe. Like this video, it helps me to spread the word further. There's no debating the fact that the world we live in today is an increasingly polluted world. It's very important for us to understand what are the chemicals in the environment and how are they affecting our hormone health, particularly as we welcome in new generations of younger girls and boys. Because this message isn't just for women and for girls, it's really for everybody, because we are all affected by changes or adverse effects on our hormones from the world in which we live. Think about this. Over 130 million chemicals are registered with the Chemicals Abstract Service, but only 25% of those 130 million chemicals have actually been tested for how they're impacting the human body. So this means that 75% of those chemicals, at least in Australia, have not been tested for how they might be adversely affecting our hormones. Our hormones play a role in, of course, our reproduction, fertility, in the way that we manage stress, the way that we sleep, also in our metabolism, our body composition, our learning. There's just so many areas of our lives that are affected when our hormones are impacted. We also know that 70% of Australian crops rely heavily on the use of pesticides. So already there, in terms of the foods that we're eating and the chemicals we might be exposed to when we eat a salad, or when we cook our broccoli, or when we roast our corn, the number of chemicals that we're exposed to and pesticide chemical residues, that's going to be an issue for many of us, if not for all of us. So another thing that we've noticed in Australia is that we have one of the worst weed resistance problems. And that means that in commercial farming, there's more use, therefore, of herbicides and pesticides. None of this can really be good for our hormone health, and certainly none of it can be good for our gut health. And while we've noticed in the charts that the numbers of chemicals in the environment is increasing, we have also seen in Australia that the number of chronic diseases is increasing, or at least the prevalence of chronic disease. So when we start to see these relationships between disease and chemicals, it's time to take note. And after listening to this video, hopefully you'll have some idea of what are the areas in your own home and living environment that you can target to reduce your chemical exposure and live better, healthier, lighter, happier. Because the truth is, while these statistics are sobering, statistics such as 1/3 of Australians do have a chronic disease, or that we are using a lot of pesticides and herbicides in agriculture, we don't just have to sit here and accept this as the new reality. We can start to make changes today. Those changes include what you buy, what you spend on, what you bring into the home, even things like whether or not you wear shoes in the house. So there are a lot of things that you can do right now to reduce your exposure to these chemicals. Let's just take every opportunity available to keep our bodies clean and pure, and also to lead by examples for future generations about how we can live in a more sustainable and clean way. When we're talking about the chemicals in our environment, one important thing to remember is that we may not get immediate results in terms of measuring these chemicals in our bodies and seeing that they've suddenly disappeared, because a lot of these chemicals have what's called a very long subsistence. This means that they can live in the environment for a long time, even after they've been legally banned. To illustrate this point, there was a study done in Sydney of babies and their umbilical cords, and the researchers wanted to test this exact concept, whether or not those chemicals that had been banned 30 years ago or more were still present in our bodies. So they tested the umbilical cords of these babies. They found 287 different types of toxins in the umbilical cords. And of those toxins, 212 had actually been banned over 30 years ago. And this proves that these chemicals can still live in our bodies and live in our environment for more than 30 years after we've stopped using them. So there's really never been a better reason than that to start working on detoxification of these chemicals right now. We're going to start our discussion by identifying what a hormone disruptor is, and then we're going to look at each of the chemicals and how they disrupt our hormones. So number one, a hormone disruptor is any sort of chemical that has an adverse effect on your hormones. Your hormones could be estrogen, progesterone, that you use as a woman for building the endometrium, for fertility, for sustaining a pregnancy, for keeping the menstrual cycle regular, those sorts of things. Also, though, for learning, cognition, memory, skin glow, hair health, a variety of reasons why we love our hormones. So anything that has an adverse effect on those hormones for women is disrupting them. For men, it could be testosterone, and it could also be creating uneven ratios of hormones. Men do have some estrogens, they have some follicle-stimulating hormone. They have similar hormones to us, but we both have them in different degrees. For men, when they become exposed to a lot of estrogens in their childhood or in the environment, that can interfere with their testosterone levels and lead to situations where, for example, the testes will not fall when their bodies are trying to mature. So it's very important for men also to protect their hormones from these hormone disrupting chemicals. And there are other hormones as well, such as the hormones leptin, ghrelin, insulin, glucagon, hormones that play a role in how we metabolize our food and how we create energy in our bodies. Then there's the adrenal hormones, cortisol, we've got aldosterone, adrenaline, noradrenaline, otherwise known as epinephrine, norepinephrine. So the potentials, I guess, for chemicals in the environment to wreak havoc in our bodies on many different systems is quite high. We can find these chemicals in our homes, in the products that we expose ourselves to physically, so things that we're touching and handling. It could also be in our hair care products, it could be in our toothpaste, it could be in the clothing that we're wearing, or even the detergents. Dishwashing detergent has chemicals in it that are known to be hormone disruptors. So we can also get it, of course, in the environment when we go outside and we're exposed to buildings, chemicals, anything that's being sprayed. Roundup is a classic example of a hormone disruptor that we are overusing and using beyond necessity. So we can get exposure to these hormones in a whole variety of ways. We could also have exposure as young children when we're playing with plastic toys. Even if you eradicate all plastic toys and you just have wooden toys, you need to be careful how they're treated, the wood. Also, you might be sucking on dummies as a baby, eating out of plastic bowls because obviously steel forks are very sharp. You might be drinking out of a plastic water bottle because glass water bottles are not the safest for babies or young children. Many of you have probably already started to look for things like BPA free on your plasticware, which is fantastic. And that's exactly the pathway that we should all be moving in if we're not already. Beyond this, there are chemicals that are found in our soil, chemicals like arsenic, lead, cadmium. These are all fairly noxious chemicals in our bodies. For example, arsenic, it's found a lot in chicken. It can also be found in rice, so to be careful of not eating too much rice. And interestingly, one study showed the rice that's grown in Australia did have high levels of arsenic. Brown rice had more arsenic than white rice. Some of these results you would think are surprising because we're taught to eat brown rice rather than white rice because it's so refined. So there are, I guess, nuances to things like the particular levels of chemicals that can accumulate in different foods. If you're wondering, exactly what type of conditions can arise from excess exposure to these chemicals, think about conditions like obesity and diabetes. This is something we're definitely noticing is increasing in prevalence at the same time as pollution and environmental toxicity. And of course, dietary changes as we move into a more processed type of diet since the Second World War. The chemicals can affect a number of body systems. They are also associated with infertility in the reproductive system and with a lack of sexual maturity and development in young boys when we're talking about estrogens in the environment in particular. And of course, a whole range of reproductive issues in women, such as fibroids and endometriosis, or any condition that is spurred along by high levels of estrogen. In men, they can cause prostate issues. They can be very toxic also on the thyroid gland. So we can get then issues with putting on weight, becoming very forgetful, becoming very tired and fatigued in that particular condition. There's also evidence that the nervous system can be affected. So that means that your ability to handle stress could be affected by the exposure to pollutants and hormone disrupting chemicals in your home or in your environment. Our discussion of the particular chemicals begins with the bisphenols. Bisphenols are abbreviated to BPA. So the chemicals that they can have include increasing the secretion of your inflammatory chemicals, in particular interleukin-6 and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These types of pro-inflammation chemicals will drive on a lot of inflammatory diseases. Inflammatory diseases don't just have to be things like arthritis, cancer conditions, or any sort of proliferative condition, fibroids, for example, endometriosis. They also could just be a woman who's going through perimenopause. Perimenopause is a very inflammatory time for women, and a lot of inflammation can be induced by the hormone changes in perimenopause. So the exposure to plastic containers, cooking utensils, and things like that could be playing a role in increasing your inflammation, even if you're just a woman who's very healthy otherwise, but is going through perimenopause and menopause. They can also increase the secretion of insulin. Insulin is a hormone that in excess can cause insulin resistance, and that's one of the precursors to diabetes. It's also involved in polycystic ovarian syndrome and metabolic syndrome. With insulin resistance, you're very tired all the time, despite how much you eat. And when you do eat, your body has a very hard time converting that food into useful energy. So it leads to fatigue, overeating, and very often overweight or obesity. Bisphenols also directly increase the amount of fat in your body, otherwise known as lipid accumulation. So if you do have a situation where you are starting to gain fat weight around, say, the middle of your body, your midsection, then exposure to plastics will worsen that, and it will drive up the accumulation of fat. It will also increase the amount of oxidative stress in your body, and sometimes that can lead to weight gain as well. Another chemical is the phthalates. Let's have a look at those. Phthalates are chemicals that are found in soft plastics that are designed to be malleable and bendable. So a really good example would be children's toys, which can be flexible and you can squeeze them. Also dog toys are a great example there. And any of the sort of flexible plastic wares, including plastic containers that we carry our food in, water bottles once again. So anything plastic and malleable. Phthalates have been associated with disrupting hormones in young boys as well as young girls. In young boys, they've been linked to the inability of the testes to drop, which is a very important part of boys in their maturation. And in all young children, they've been associated with disrupting the estrogen, or at least providing excess estrogens. But for many of us as adults watching this, what will be important to us, for us to note, is that the phthalates also play a role in obesity, overweight, diabetes, and insulin resistance. They do this because they increase the amount of fat peroxidation that occurs in your body, and they also increase the amount of fat that you accumulate. They reduce the insulin receptor sensitivity, which is very problematic. In conditions like insulin resistance, the whole issue is that the insulin receptors are not responsive to the insulin, and therefore not allowing insulin to do its work and convert food into energy. So here are my top tips when it comes to avoiding bisphenols and phthalates and other types of chemicals found in plastics, plasticware, plastic containers, and so on. Number 1, reduce the packaged food that you eat. Number 2, avoid using cookware that is labeled as non-stick, but it may contain various types of toxins. Also, be aware that aluminium cookware and copper cookware could be okay for some, but for others, they might have elevated levels of aluminium and copper. And also with your food, try to buy organic food wherever possible. Avoid using plastic if possible. So if instead you can use a wax wrap to wrap up your food, that's fantastic. If you can use glass for your storage vessels, glass water bottles could be an option for you. There could be other ways that you could preserve your foods. Stainless steel containers and stainless steel water bottles could also be an option. And try to use more paper-based storage, such as paper sandwich bags for lunches instead of the plastic sandwich bags. Really be aware of reducing or minimizing your use of PET, HDPE, or LDPE. These are all different types of polyethylenes, and also PP, which is polypropylene. And as much as you can, try to absolutely avoid the use of PVC, which is polyvinyl chloride, and any other types of plastics. And try and get everything to be either labeled BPA free, so that you know that you're not getting at least bisphenols in that product, phthalate free if possible as well. A really important chemical to also mention is glyphosate. Glyphosate is one of the most problematic chemicals in our environment because it's being used in our crops and agriculture for growing grains like wheat. So with glyphosates being used in wheat production, you can imagine how many of us eat bread at least once a week. That's a constant source of glyphosate in our bodies. Glyphosate is problematic because it actually leads to a reduced ability of your body to remove some of those chemical toxins. There was a study in 2013, which was done by Samsel and Senef, and they found that glyphosate increased the recycling of toxins in the liver, and also that they had found a lot of glyphosate contamination in portal veins of the liver, and that contamination caused the recycling of those toxins between the gut and the liver. So glyphosate, we would think, could be problematic because we're eating it through our foods, and we never would suspect it because we've gone and we've bought our wheat and we just think that's it. We've got our wheat flour, let's make some bread. But it is possible that in the farming and production of wheat that we're getting exposure to these chemicals. Another practice that's done, I'm not sure if it's done in Australia at the moment, it could be, but quite commonly before harvesting, Roundup or some sort of herbicide like that could be used on the wheat in order to make it easier to harvest. So that's another possibility where you could be getting a chemical coming in to your food. So again, always buy certified organic where you can. And understandably, not everyone's budget will extend to buying certified organic. So try to just get the pieces that you can afford, and know that you're doing as much as you can to reduce your exposure to these chemicals. None of us are perfect, so we all just do the best that we can. If you're a woman or a child, the chances of you absorbing these chemicals is actually higher. Studies show us that women have more fat in our bodies, and our fat, compared to our protein, is more likely to be absorbing and storing these harmful hormone disrupting chemicals. For children, of course, one of the things that I've noticed since having a child is that they put their fingers in everything. So there's that physical exposure to the chemicals, but also their bodies are very pure, they absorb things. perhaps more efficiently than we would as adults. So children may be more likely to retain these chemicals as well. And from the earlier study that I mentioned about the umbilical cords, you would already have a sense now that even before we're born, we're absorbing some of these harmful chemicals. Another reason why possibly women are more prone to absorbing these chemicals is because of the amount of personal care products that we use. These chemicals can be found in our lotions, body creams, hairsprays, sunscreens, so nail polishes, So once you're putting all those things on your body, the chances of having exposure to those chemicals greatly increases compared to somebody who pretty much never uses a lotion. So again, this doesn't mean that you can't use those products, but have a look at what they contain in them and always go with organic and as pure as you possibly can. And even have a go at making some of these things on your own in your own kitchen. You can make a beautiful face mask with avocado. You can make your own rosemary infusions, just rosemary tea. Use that as a hair tonic. That's what I do. You can make beautiful hair oils just by cooking up stinging nettles in oil and then allowing it to cool and then rubbing it into the scalp. You can create a beautiful face wash with a chamomile tea. So there are lots of options for us to be able to keep ourselves clean without having to even go out and buy a product. We might have something in our fridge that we can use already. I did mention before that it's possible that some of these chemicals might have an adverse effect on our nervous system and our ability to handle stress. So what's also been found in studies, particularly in one study in 2015, was that when the mothers were found to have some BPA levels detected in their bodies, high exposure to BPA, they found that the chances of anxiety and depression in the child were higher. So another reason for us to reduce our chemical exposure, just so that we're not passing on those extra vulnerabilities, I suppose, to our children. Another note for women, the chemicals have particular ability to target and affect certain parts of our bodies. So this is a little bit of an overview of where the hormones can affect us. The BPAs, the phthalates, have a strong effect in the uterus. Herbicides can affect the uterus, pesticides as well. And in fact, it's a bit of an old belief that by herbalists that our uterus becomes a dumping ground for chemicals after a while. So, we tend to kind of store things in there that we really shouldn't be storing just because they don't know where else, our bodies can't work out where else to put them. So how do you approach being able to support your detoxification, have healthy hormones, and remove these chemicals? Okay, so I'm going to outline now a little bit of a step-by-step process for you. And the very first thing that I would do is I would look at any of your personal care products because they're quite close to your skin. You might even be eating them or absorbing them without thinking about it. So the lip balms, lip glosses, lip plumpers, anything you use on your face, any products, anything that you use in your hair and on your body. So look at all of those products and give them a little bit of a run through in terms of what chemicals and ingredients they might contain, and try to go for certified organic wherever possible. The next thing I would do is I would make sure that you're not wearing shoes in the house. Wearing shoes in the house brings a whole lot of chemicals into the house. And that can increase your chemical exposure as well, because if we've got lead in our air, who knows what we have on our grounds. Next thing I would do is I would have a look at the cookware that you're using, and I would make sure that it is PFOA free. And, stainless steel is always a really good option. I mean, most of my pots are stainless steel because I just like the simplicity of it. So apart from that, there are some herbs that you can use to support detoxification. Some herbs are excellent at removing heavy metals, like St. Mary's thistle. However, this also means that St. Mary's thistle might leach out your iron. So if you're low iron, then you can't really use it. I'll give you a few ideas of the herbs that I use in clinic and also that herbalists use, and some of our strategies when it comes to detoxification, because that's essentially what you're trying to do. You're trying to detoxify your hormones. And in many cases, you're trying to remove excess estrogens from the environment. Okay, so they are known as xenoestrogens. So number one, you want to use supplements like vitamin C, magnesium, and zinc. These are important supplements for your body to be able to support healthy liver function, which then removes a lot of these chemicals for you. With herbs, you might bring in herbs like ginger, turmeric, and St. Mary's thistle if it's appropriate. Turmeric is really a wonderful herb for detoxification. You could be cooking up a turmeric latte every day and then mixing up a little mix of vitamin C powder, magnesium powder. You could be taking your zinc supplement and supporting your detoxification pathways just by doing that alone. The liver, however, has many different stages of detoxification, so we need to address the second stage as well. In the first stage, it's basically about breaking down chemistry, but in the second stage and third, it's about actually effectively removing it. In the second stage, we use supplements such as rosemary, and turmeric can be useful here as well. And another herb that we love is schisandra. These are particular herbs that help with the removal of the chemicals. So remember, we don't just want to break the chemicals down, we want to effectively remove them. And you would need to see a naturopath to get many of those in the strongest therapeutic form. So please go and do that, because they'll also need to screen you if there's any reason why you can't have those herbs. Another great way of working around this is to work on your gut. If you can increase your gut bowel function, the number of bowel motions that you're having a day, so maybe if you're getting one every other day, maybe get yourself to 2 a day. This will also help with detoxification and clearance, and it will also make your liver more happy. A happy liver is a liver that can detoxify easily for you. Some of the supplements also that can be useful in this second stage of liver detoxification, where we're actively binding to those chemical parts and removing them, is NAC, N-acetylcysteine. And N-acetylcysteine is very useful in a lot of proliferative conditions, including conditions like endometriosis, where you have a lot of estrogenic activity, a lot of tissues being built and causing problems for the body. For many of us, the problematic chemical in the environment that really affects our hormones is estrogens or xenoestrogens. So these are the estrogens that are not made in our bodies, but they act like the estrogens made in our bodies, and they can contribute to estrogen-dominant conditions or estrogen-driven conditions, including endometriosis, breast cancer, and those sorts of conditions that always have that strong estrogen component. So it's very important to actually see a herbalist or naturopath if you're wanting to work at this level on targeting specific estrogens, because we can work strategically depending on which estrogen is affected and which pathway is affected. For example, when it comes to estrogen metabolism, we do have a primary estrogen, estradiol, E2. This is our most potent estrogen. And it can be converted into E1, which is a less active estrogen, but can also lead to the production of more proliferative types of estrogen. So some of the herbs that have come up in studies and shown to be very effective at, for example, reducing the amount of xenoestrogens in our bodies or chemicals that we're holding in our bodies are the NAC, the curcumin, the St. Mary's thistle. So you will find studies that demonstrate their effectiveness. Also, calcium D-glucarate has been found to be useful in studies on, again, that hormone clearance and reducing the impact on your hormones from environmental toxins. So in summary, there are a number of chemicals that we're exposed to in our environment on a daily basis. You can start to detoxify your body from these chemicals by removing them from your home first. Once you've done that, you can have a look at the foods that you're buying and always aim to buy certified organic where you're able to and where the budget permits. If you can go to a local farmer's market, again, even better. And also, if you can try to buy food that is not wrapped in plastic, then that's going to help you as well. Third thing you can do is, if you are suffering from an estrogen-dominant condition, or you have chronic headaches, chronic fatigue, thyroid problems, metabolic syndrome, obesity, overweight, diabetes, any of the conditions that I've talked about, then think about seeing a naturopath like me, or even booking in with me. And we can work on a protocol where we start to bring the herbs in and the supplements, the evidence-based ones, the ones that have been shown to be efficacious in reducing toxin load, and we can start on a 12-week program. Usually you'd want to allow that 12 weeks for toxin purification, and you'll be feeling amazing. But just to warn you, when you do go through processes of detoxification, usually you will feel tired in the first instance, and then your energy will really pick up and you'll be feeling amazing. But there is a period of time where you want to take it easy, eat well, sleep well, and allow your body to feel tired, because it's moving the toxins around in order to remove them from your body. Have a wonderful day. Thanks for listening, and all the best with your hormone health. Bye, everybody. For anybody who's not familiar with what I do, I am a naturopath. I work predominantly with women on their hormonal health. I assist with the management of several different types of hormonal conditions, everything from infertility, polycystic ovarian syndrome, through to menopause, perimenopause, and natural shifts and changes in the hormones as our bodies recalibrate through the different life stages. I work with herbal medicines, nutrition and diet, and lifestyle as well. You can find out more about me on my website, herbalwell, herbalwell.com.au. You can also follow me on the socials, and all of the links are below. To help me spread the word, please follow this channel or subscribe and like this video as well, and share with anybody who you feel could benefit from it. I have a lot of other webinars, videos, and also podcast recordings. My podcast is called Well Woman, WELL Woman, and that's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon, all the major podcast services and platforms.